Internet Informed, Guidance for the Dedicated Searcher, as read by the author David Novak. This book is an element of the Spire Project. Chapter 3, Quality. Albert accompanied Friar Carlo, an aging Catholic missionary, on a journey into the Pyrenees Mountains. Church officials wished to dissuade the local pastors from teaching doctrine contrary to the prescribed texts. Certain rural priests had begun preaching concepts of humanism and communalism. To Friar Carlo, such ideas were abhorrent heresy, an ultimate sin imperiling the very souls of these country peasants. Albert believed differently. He knew the locals as peaceful frontier folk. He genuinely liked them and easily tolerated their occasional oddities. The white-haired missionary from Rome sought to convert these heathens back to a life with Jesus, which was a little amusing since the locals already considered themselves Christians. Only foreigners like Friar Carlo considered them heathens or Cathars. Of course, the priest needed no protection. No one would do violence against the traveling missionary. Albert's presence only served to ease political tension back in Toulouse. On this trip, Albert felt certain the peasants would listen, a few would convert again to Catholic doctrine, and local practices would continue as they had for several centuries, slowly building, into a distinct southern French culture. However, this friar's preaching included a serious threat. Vatican leaders were becoming frustrated. A persistent alienation threatened the foundation of Catholic unity. Like a slow poison working its evil magic first in the limbs, a cure was most urgently required. If this trend towards religious diversity was not reversed, it would imperil everything the Catholic Church had worked to achieve. As Albert trudged along the rocky path leading into the Pyrenees, he pondered an unspoken question. How would the Church draw the line between Catholicism and heresy? The information revolution washes over us. It picks us up and pushes us forward like so much driftwood. From now on, our lives will be forever awash with information. We eat it, breathe it, live in it, drown in it. Some of us will even learn to live for it. Yet we do not crave the consumption of more information. Overeating just makes us fat. We crave instead answers to questions, even to questions we can't quite articulate. As we hunt for that perfect item of information that will satisfy all our concerns and solve our challenges, remember, such information may well exist. It often exists. Yet it stands alongside much comparable but less satisfying information. Perfect information hides in plain sight. We deserve information we can trust. We deserve quality. We deserve definitive and comprehensive answers too, but we're half a book too early to tackle that challenge. Let us first deal with this issue of quality, for astonishingly we can deal with this concern completely. Once we know how, quality is obvious. The Internet is the most quality transparent medium we have. I find an insightful article to accompany my steaming cup of hibiscus flower tea as I sit reading in a tea house I do not often visit. The article is lively, well written. It describes with clarity the peculiar nuances to the bloody conflict between India and Pakistan over mountainous Kashmir. It makes several intriguing suggestions. I put down the well-thumbed magazine, sip my hot tea, and ponder an unspoken question. How much truth resides in this article? Quality is always an issue. I'm not so naive as to believe everything is true all the time. People lie, people persuade. Even when facts are rendered accurately and faithfully, facts can be selectively presented. Choose a few undisputed facts that favor a chosen position, marshal them into a logical argument, now set aside the facts that would refute or weaken this position. Voila! A persuasive argument that leads in a natural progression all the way to our chosen conclusion. Such arguing, such persuasion, will probably lead others to agree to something they would not agree to if they knew all the facts. Because of this, all of us have a serious difficulty. We simply cannot judge information solely by its reasonableness. Sound arguments are reassuring, most certainly, but a declaration of truth, quality, and trust must stand on more than the facts as they are presented. As a topic, quality has depth and spirit. Who wrote the article on Kashmiri politics? Unfortunately, I do not recognize the author's name. The author is not Dominic Dunn, who writes for the magazine Vanity Fair, and whose slant and degree of honesty I think I have tied down. The author is not another of perhaps 50 authors I recognize by name. No, this author comes from just another writer I have never encountered before. The magazine is also new to me. I subscribe to few magazines, but know many by reputation and enjoy several with zeal. I trust The Atlantic for a reputable, detailed read. I know Foreign Policy as a respectable, incisive policy journal. I consider Time as a superficial, biased, yet timely magazine. I do not know the magazine in my hand. 2 strikes. I know neither the author nor publisher. The information reaches me from an anonymous source, as it were. I am none the wiser as to the quality of this intriguing article. There is more to consider. For instance, good articles keep good company. I take another sip of my tea, then reach again for the magazine. Glancing first at the table of contents, I rapidly page through the magazine, looking for evidence of quality in the articles that appear nearby. I see name brand advertising. I see an article on the future of NATO. I continue browsing. If I see one word about reading tea leaves or a fundamentalist slogan, my suspicion of value will shatter. Good information keeps good company. This is not just a reflection of the work of a publisher. It reflects any selection process. Good magazines keep good company too. I found this magazine on the corner table of a tea house, so most likely it is a good mainstream magazine. Tea house owners select magazines that interest their patrons. When I find a magazine in a library, it may be less mainstream, but it will be respectable or at least popular. Librarians purchase the important and prominent magazines for their patrons. When a friend passes me a magazine to read, my friend selects that magazine for my attention. In a sense, the tea house owner, acquisition librarian, and friend all vouch for these magazines. I don't mean they put their reputation on the line, that they believe deeply in the value of these magazines. No, they probably never read the article in question. This influence is more subtle. They vouch for the importance of these magazines, or at least their popularity. They select these magazines instead of others. I, in turn, trust them not to lead me to the trashiest of magazines. Such vouching can be vital. In the field of international politics, some reputable-sounding policy journals are little more than marketing pieces for special interest groups. They become vehicles to broadcast a perspective, and some perspectives in our world are seriously unbalanced. However, such magazines are unlikely to find their way to the side table of a tea house, onto the shelves of a public library, and into our hands courtesy of a friend. Drawing our attention back to the article on Kashmiri politics, we learned very little just now. An interesting article by an unknown author writing in a mainstream publication that appears to publish good articles. That about sums up our assessment. Our avenues explored, I file in my mind the premise of this intriguing article. I attach a questioned uncertainty to its quality. Perhaps when I read of Kashmir again, I will drag this article from the depths of my mind to compare and decide again if the article's solution had merit. A half cup of tea, an intriguing article, and a little detective work makes for a delightfully civilized moment. As I consume my morning policy prediction, I weigh, measure, and judge information. I undertake what is called a quality assessment, that for the most part I leave unfinished. Can we investigate further? Of course we can. I forgot to look at the author's credentials in the byline. Sometimes the first few pages of a magazine will introduce contributors with a paragraph-long biography. What was the date on the magazine? An old issue would not be so valuable. When was the article first written? Too much may have happened since it was prepared. Can we confirm this magazine is popular? Magazines usually include their circulation number in the January issue. If I see this magazine selling in a Borders bookstore, that too would indicate a fair circulation. Lastly, I forgot to nudge the tea drinker beside me and ask, do you know and trust this magazine? Perhaps this stranger is an acclaimed scholar of Kashmiri politics. Quality assessment saves us from believing in unsupported, unworthy conclusions. This can be very important when decisions must be made. Quality assessment also saves us time. We discard doubtful information when better information is thought nearby. We spend more time with information we trust most. Yet quality assessment works best when quick. This must not be a trial by minutiae or a strenuous test of our patience. We must somehow consider and swiftly decide if information is valuable to us. The inspiration I want you to see is that each of the steps and concerns we shared with our Kashmiri article apply equally on the Internet. Permit me to describe a simple framework I call Q4 quality assessment. It is fast, straightforward, and deliciously revealing. I have only gradually pieced it together over the last 3 years, but if you let it, it will dramatically change the way you look at Internet information from now on. Q4 quality assessment has 4 dimensions. Q1, internal clues. Q2, author and publisher identity. Q3, context. Q4, endorsements. For each dimension, look in a specific direction, ask a specific question, then make a judgment. When assessing internal clues, observe the spelling, grammar, date, and internal logic of the information. Is the information delivered in a sane, professional manner? When assessing the identity of the author and publisher, consider the credentials, occupation, and source of funding. Does this author and publisher have the experience to deliver this information? If so, where would their bias lie? Context and endorsements direct our attention elsewhere. When we finish, much of the purpose, bias, and value of an item of information will become apparent. The whole process may take as little as 2 minutes. Let us start with internal clues, the most understood aspect of quality. Q1. Internal clues to quality. Good information shouts clarity, sanity, and professionalism. We see evidence of this within the spelling, grammar, and writing style. We see further evidence in the presence of a copyright notice, well-crafted images, a link to biographical information, a date, and more. These are all internal clues, meaning simply they're found within the information under consideration. Just read and judge how sane and professional the information seems to be. Evidence of professionalism suggests the manner the author will deal with information when it counts. Make correct use of spelling and grammar, and we presume the author makes correct use of facts as well. Marshal and express an argument succinctly, and we presume the author considers and researches their arguments. Unfortunately, this link between professionalism and value is fairly tenuous. Essentially, we trust that when an author or publisher remembers to check their spelling, then they probably won't misquote Shakespeare. When the author protects a document with a copyright notice, perhaps the document is worth protecting. The internal logic to an author's argument seems to make sense when we understand it, so perhaps the internal logic holds true when we don't. There is a professional approach to working with information. The hallmark is an attention to detail and placing the reader's interests above those of the author. Address our reading concern about bias, currency, and supportive detail. Take steps to help readers appreciate factual nuances and confirm details. Include references. Provide sufficient information to verify pivotal facts. Links to biographical details. These steps and steps like these help us as readers to move beyond persuasion. These steps help us believe and trust a conclusion. This professional approach is very distinct from the inexperienced work of high school students and the empty writing of marketing staff. It is a style built on revealing relevant facts, instead of authors pushing their conclusions. When the author and publisher work on our behalf, we more easily trust their content and conclusion. We trust, for instance, that we can verify important details with external sources. We probably will never take the time to verify anything, but the professional approach suggests this trust is not misplaced. In general, we stake an author's reputation on the truthfulness of their arguments. Except that we should verify details. As this picture unfolds, we are implicitly told that should an author try to deceive us, we are helpless to see through this deceit unless committed by a preschooler. We can only hope the culprit slips up, as it were, and some culturally inexperienced political pundit spells a word incorrectly. Perhaps a publisher, intent on convincing us to agree with some key point they passionately believe, absent-mindedly declares their affiliation to the Ku Klux Klan. For our part, we stay alert for such mistakes and wonder if the author presents facts or opinions. This is not a very satisfying state of affairs. The eminent Japanese scientist may have excellent reasons for his atrocious spelling. Similarly, an author forgets to include a copyright notice or considers a link to a useful book as clutter instead of scholarship. Perhaps we should consider nothing more of such unforgivable gaffes. Yet this is what we do. Tear a manuscript apart as we look for blunders. Tally them up, then make a judgment. Professional handling of information includes supporting conclusions. Shortly, I will introduce to you an article that tells of international aid agencies kidnapping Muslim children for sale in Western countries, an accusation courtesy of an Islamic fundamentalist much in the news this last decade. Does the author support this accusation effectively? Such a loaded statement surely requires supporting evidence. Not supporting such a loaded statement allows us to label the work as unprofessional and less than sane. Quality information shouts sanity and professionalism. Part of this equation is that serious authors understand that persuasion is delightful, but not in the interest of the reader. To work to the interests of the reader, authors must disclose the uncomfortable facts, the alternative interpretations, the opposing views. They must share something of themselves, especially their credentials. Readers have the right to know. Providing biographical information is simplicity itself on the internet. Just link each article to a separate biography. Away from the internet, authors still must mention credentials and experience, though usually all too briefly. The sane and professional author also reveals any serious bias they may have. An author holds a political office? Let the reader know. An author has a relationship with an organization significant to the issue? Let the reader know. Having bias should certainly not stop anyone from publishing, but bias should be admitted early. A wise reader can easily counter bias by reading information biased in an alternative way. This is not too much to ask. When authors do not share their bias in biography, we can label one of two accusations. Firstly, they fail to consider it important. I call this neglect. Perhaps it is truly unimportant. Perhaps including such information is unimportant to the author. The intended audience of peers already knows the author personally, or knows the supporting evidence to the conclusion. The author does not care if their message is conveyed poorly to a distant, unfamiliar audience. We simply are not their audience. Newsgroup and specialist discussions often fall into this category. It was created for a specific group in mind, a group informed by a continuing discussion extending over many messages. Each post is not structured to stand alone or present a conclusion to outsiders effectively. The alternative to neglect is deceit, or more softly, untrustworthiness. The author intentionally decides not to include biographical details and not to mention their bias. Disclosing such details would probably hurt the persuasive power of their information in some way. Many a business or industry will spin off an association or institute to support their primary aims. While these associations and institutes are nominally independent, their perspectives and bias remain firmly with those of their founding and supporting organizations. But do authors and publishers reveal these affiliations? When they do not, or when they disguise a relationship, from our perspectives as readers, the author and publisher place their interests at persuading us above our interest in gathering clear information. However common and normal this behavior may seem, unrevealed relationships damage trust. Yes, trust. As authors, we can lose our readers' trust by being clumsy or by unsuccessfully distancing ourselves from our bias. How can we earn trust? Firstly, mention or reference the work of others who support our conclusions. Quoting the New York Times or the Louvre helps. References show that other credible authors and publishers support some fact or position too. The NASA technology label on face cream, La Mer, an energy drink, Tang, and many a water purifier tells us the technology conforms to NASA quality standards. Oh, such a relief. If it works on the moon, it'll probably work in my humble kitchen. Secondly, reference the work of people who disagree with our position. In scholarly papers, referring to alternative arguments assures us the author is aware of such arguments, even if considered then rejected. Such references also show the author tries to present the whole picture, tries for a balanced perspective. Thirdly, provide the information necessary to confirm stated facts. Instead of indicating a survey of 9 out of 10 dentists like toothpaste, give us the name of the organization that undertook the survey. Instead of saying scientists discovered a new planet circling a distant star, tell us who discovered it and who verified its existence. Go one step further and link to the confirming statement by a space agency. With Internet material, single-click verification to pivotal facts is a great advantage to the reader, and so very simple for the author to include. Fourthly, provide details of the research behind a conclusion. Provide as much as possible so interested readers can confirm for themselves how we reached a conclusion. Consider the technical research report. It includes specific research methodologies. Any reader unsatisfied with a conclusion can read over the method and consider the evidence directly. An author summarizes the results of a survey. Where are the survey questions? Perhaps question 4 was phrased in a misleading manner. Fifthly, consider the concept of margin of error as used in statistical analysis. When the Australian Bureau of Statistics compiles and publishes census and survey results, they also calculate how mathematically certain their results are. With small sample sizes, the margin of error grows. Sharing this uncertainty with the reader shows professionalism. Away from statistics, a careful author may simply draw attention to a drought of relevant studies on a topic. The author may describe a discovery as provisional, awaiting confirmation. Trust is more complicated than this. Indeed, trust, like quality, ultimately depends on other factors like context and what others say of a document. We're not done discussing trust. Surveys deserve our most careful attention. Abbreviated statistics are particularly prone to abuse. John Mueller, in a 2005 article in Foreign Affairs, demonstrated this beautifully with the following. Quote, "It is close to impossible to judge how many people want to get out or stay the course in Iraq at any given time because so much depends on how the question is worded. For example, there is far more support for gradual withdrawal or beginning to withdraw than for withdrawing or immediate withdrawal." John goes on to recount how in August 2005, the Washington Post found a 54%-44% split when questioned, "Do you think the United States should keep its military forces in Iraq until civil order is restored there, even if that means continued U.S. military casualties? Or do you think the United States should withdraw its military forces from Iraq in order to avoid further U.S. military casualties, even if that means civil order is not restored there?" In the same month, a Harris poll reported 36-61% split when questioned, "Do you favor keeping a large number of U.S. troops in Iraq until there is a stable government there, or bringing most of our troops home in the next year?" a 54% 44% split, or 36% 61% split based on little more than how we phrase our question? How important then to hand over the question and not just summarize a survey as a majority supports or barely a third favor? John Mueller's example reminds us that reasonableness does not always equate well with quality. We could easily make a very reasonable argument with either of those two surveys just mentioned. Our very reasonable and persuasive argument, delivered in isolation, seems honest and true, backed by survey integrity even. That each seemingly honest and reasonable argument concludes differently merely proves we must not judge quality by reasonableness alone. Support. Presenting unsupported information is a serious misdemeanor. Without a source, date, margin of error, and a way to confirm for ourselves the truthfulness of information, an author essentially says, "Trust me." And however much we may wish to trust the author, however much we may be led to expect this kind of behavior, an author displays bad manners in asking for this trust. Here was a perfect opportunity to earn the reader's trust, and the author messed up. This is like a journalist quoting unnamed sources, or a news personality saying, "Rumor has it." Why state something without mentioning where it comes from? As readers, we must either trust the author's word or toss our hands in the air and shout, "What?" to an author who cannot reply. It reminds me of a criticism I long held with a certain set of business benchmarks. These benchmarks provided remarkable detail on how comparable businesses budget their resources. Unfortunately, for all their uniqueness, they even provided a quintile breakdown of the more important business ratios. They did not reveal the sample size. They went to so much effort to convey some excellent statistics, but left off the one piece of information I sought most. Without a sample size, how could I know if these statistics reflected the experience of 5 or 500 comparable businesses? We can, of course, trust the publisher knows what they're doing, that they would not sell business benchmarks compiled from just 5 businesses. I suppose we have to trust them, right? Should we? I trust the World Health Organization. I trust the British Museum. I do not naturally trust a commercial business. I've watched too many television shows where the evil bad guys are business managers trying to keep a secret. That said, to ask for such trust is just inconsiderate and irresponsible. Noam Chomsky touched on this idea in reference to documentaries. Quote, "Personally, I don't even like to watch documentaries where I agree completely with the thrust of it, because there is something about it that strikes me as sort of false. Namely, it's presenting the facts in a way in which you can only evaluate them from the point of view of the person who put it together. Now, it's also true of the printed page, but less so. Yes, marshal an argument from a few undisputed facts favoring a chosen conclusion. Set aside those facts that weaken our conclusion. Voila! We have a persuasive argument not easily refuted without these absent facts and unmentioned interpretations." The personal and visual nature of documentaries, and I would add especially network news, makes it difficult for the incompletely informed to disbelieve a persuasive argument. We too easily trust distilled images. We have the image, after all. Pictures don't lie unless they're fabricated, right? We seem to overlook video clips can be real but sliced, diced, and biased. Seeing the excited Iraqi crowd toppling a statue of Saddam Hussein speaks to us loudly in a way we cannot easily disbelieve. A year later, I see the documentary WMD, Weapons of Mass Deception, and see how the event was manufactured for the media with a crowd intentionally brought in for the purpose of filming. I am again persuaded, this time, that the event was manufactured. It seems that I cannot hold a degree of disbelief in front of visual material. My eyes do not let me evaluate images as anything other than truth or fabrication. Remember the Rodney King episode in 1991 that led to the riots in Los Angeles, California? Edited footage gave a very vivid appearance of police brutality, an obvious bashing of Rodney King by no fewer than 4 police officers. We quickly offered our trust and outrage at a time when perhaps we should have remained more uncertain. Yes, real images, no, biased and isolated, perhaps unworthy of our trust. Instead, we accused and judged the Los Angeles Police Department solely on the basis of a slice-dice video segment. That may well have been brutality. The Christopher Commission found the Los Angeles Police Department did have trouble with brutality. The law courts concluded that instance was not brutality, though a later civil court case found 2 of the police officers guilty. Then Los Angeles Police Chief Daryl Gates recounts, quote, "No one knew what Rodney King had done beforehand to be stopped. No one realized that he was a parolee and that he was violating his parole. No one knew any of those things. All they saw was this grainy film and police officers hitting him over the head." Close quote. A variety of opinions surfaced, But we saw a video and attained clarity in 10 seconds. Can we not keep a modicum of uncertainty? No, as the police officers were acquitted of all charges but one, citizens rampaged. I believe it probably was police brutality, but in the absence of something stronger than a slice of confronting video footage, perhaps the most sensible response was qualified outrage. I am appalled at the brutality if what I see bears true under closer investigation. The phrase, if what I see bears true, and perhaps also we are simply too far from the event to see clearly, may help us frame our difficulties. We are not without information, but we are starved of the clues we need to believe a conclusion. We are often starved of information. Just who was right in the Kashmiri conflict? The answer should not depend on which side set off the latest bomb. Do we really want to make a 5-second judgment and blame the suggested perpetrator at a time when we have little credible, unbiased information? Have you noticed how some scientific research papers try too hard to present discoveries and conclusions in all possible lights, interpreted according to all possible perspectives? The author-researcher sometimes pretends not even to have an opinion of what the results mean except in a concluding line or two. In good science, there is no persuasion. The scientific paper focuses solely on communicating facts. Academic circles expect such behavior. In political discourse, such raw, unspun facts would be so unusual as to border on unprofessional. How could a professional pundit fail to take an opportunity to spin and bias and persuade us of something? The same can be said of marketing. If 9 out of 10 dentists agree, just what was the question? We shall never know. In some arenas, we expect subterfuge. We expect statements not to have supporting evidence. Spin doctors spin, marketers market. Yet such expectations should not blind us to the fact that this is less than sane, professional, informative writing. In terms of our quality assessment, the author loudly proclaims they are not working with our interests in mind. The author prefers to persuade. While we may not declare this as less than sane, certainly the author and publisher do not deserve our complete trust. They have decided not to earn it. Yes, to a degree, all discussion tries to persuade. What kind of political documentary would engage our minds yet not express a perspective? We may believe in ever-present bias. We may believe in something akin to nepotism and kleptocracy. Perhaps everyone with a public voice has the right, even privilege, to try to bend our views ruthlessly to match theirs. Realistically, so very many authors will try to persuade us, will reach beyond facts and objective conclusions with persuasion. So many authors we encounter will select facts to suit an agenda, hide uncomfortable details, and generally deliver information in an unbalanced, untrustworthy manner. I'm sure I have in this book, though I'm not certain where. Perhaps it is the author's right to persuade us with one-sided arguments, questionable statistics, and undecided alternatives. If we believe this, then we have merely shifted the burden of trust to ourselves. Waive the author's responsibility to deliver trustworthy and balanced information, and we must assume the role of ensuring truth and balance ourselves. We absolutely must gain alternative information and synthesize a decent conclusion to mitigate the effects of persuasion. If we do not assume the mantle, and neither does the author, then perhaps we deserve to be misguided and wrong. Currency. One final issue to consider, date. The Internet loves to confound us here, for any date mentioned may mean when the information was prepared, published, compiled, or assembled. As I write this book, I am mindful that some of my guidance dates back to the mid-1990s. The foundation of this information comes from my experience creating the Spire project between 1997 and 2000. Some elements, like context-based quality assessment, are but a year old, and some ideas come together as I write. The book you hold prints copyright 2007 at the start of the book, but since the book was quickly sent to print, most of this book was typed in mid-2006, mid-2007. Somehow, copyright 2007 fails to express the range of dates involved. I shall release 2 chapters of this book on the Internet. As a web page, it may well have a date reflecting when the chapter was published to the Internet, and perhaps even the day you downloaded the chapters, depending on how the web page is structured. How very confusing. Statistics suffer the same confusion. Statistics in a 2004 publication by the Australian Bureau of Statistics may refer only to information surveyed a year earlier. Industry statistics are often severely backdated. Perhaps trade to the financial year July 2005 to June 2006 is compiled and published in February 2007. Compiling census material in particular takes time, often a year or more. Articles can also have confusing dates. The publishing process may take days or months. Some magazines reprint articles published elsewhere earlier. An article may be a book excerpt. the material prepared years earlier. Date can easily confuse us. Here are some possible solutions. 1. If the page is prominent, consider consulting the Internet Archive at archives.org for a historical look at the web page. The Internet Archive will often present prominent web pages as they appear 3 years ago, 2 years ago, and 18 months ago. 2. Sometimes the URL itself indicates a date. xyz.com/news/0601 was probably published in June 2001, the 6th month of 01. Messages sent to newsgroups or mailing lists often have a specific date etched into their complex web address. 3. Your Internet browser may be able to detect when a page was last uploaded to the web. With Microsoft's Internet Explorer, under the File pull-down menu, select Properties. Occasionally, this will include a created and modified date. 4. How many links are no longer valid? Links age over time and break. When many links are broken, we should worry about the age of the resource. In my own work, I found about 1 link in 30 dies in a 3-month period, though this rate is tied to the topic and degree of deep linking, so it's a very crude estimate. 5. For Internet and print media alike, look for dated events within the document. Perhaps the author mentioned a news event. I just quoted John Mueller's article in November-December 2005 issue of Foreign Affairs. Shortly, I will mention a case of Elion Gonzalez washing ashore in Florida. Such statements date the writing. 6. Statistics also date a document. If a document refers to statistics published in 2006 but not 2008, then the document was probably prepared between these two dates. 7. Guess. Searching is not the exact science we may prefer it to be. We will guess more as this book proceeds. Perhaps the document presents the Internet a little too enthusiastically, a little too rosy, and this alone brings to mind an earlier era. Perhaps the author likes Alta Vista, and while still around, Alta Vista was more famous a few years ago. We have now covered the use of internal clues to judge quality. In Q1, we simply ask, do I find the author sane and professional? Notice this is a different question to the favorite, do I agree with the author? The advantage in asking both questions is that our conclusion is tempered from an implied, I believe and trust you, to a more limited, I find your writing sane and professional. We will not read too much into the appearance and reasonableness of an argument in this way. Is the author clumsy, reserved, and suspicious? Is the author helping us to trust and verify their position? In a sense, do I agree with the author is a completely different issue and quite unrelated to what the author-publisher's behavior suggests. We can easily disagree with an author's perspective and conclusion, but we cannot so easily ignore a perspective delivered in a rational, professional manner. What do we mean by quality? Before we continue on and address source, context, and endorsements, let us review some of the traps and subtle nuances to this issue of quality. I have 3 points I think you will find worthy of a diversion. 1. Internet quality is a fluid concept. 2. Quality is plural. 3. Notions of objective truth may obstruct our search for meaning. The issue of Internet quality has changed remarkably over the last few years. In the early days of the Internet, all information was suspect. The graphic image of this was a dog sitting before a computer. The caption reads, "On the Internet, you never know who you are talking to." Consider nothing on the Internet is credible. Everything has to be confirmed with something in print. In time, of course, we improved on abject disbelief. With the early flood of good government information, belated agreements surfaced that some Internet information could be trusted. Not everything on the Internet held to the standard of dog chatter. Part of this advance rested in identifying government agencies and prominent corporations, since they took great pains to usher in only reputable information to the Internet. The presence of .gov in the address was an easy clue, keeping in mind, of course, the often repeated reports of hacked websites. The next improvement, on presumed disbelief, was buried within the information itself. If careful, we can spot questionable material. We can sort the work of high school students from professionals. This, of course, is the use of internal clues to quality. Time progressed and a more serious approach to Internet quality emerged, thanks primarily to members of the librarian community. Library science literature includes numerous checklists and mnemonic devices to help judge quality. 2 I often see are RAP, reliable, accurate, and plausible, and CARS, credible, accurate, reasonable, and support. A questioning searcher starts a merry chase to determine the character of an item of information. For each, there are several hints and clues. Reliable means reputable, confirmable. Accurate deals with the margin of error, survey size, and precision. If you detect my minor annoyance, this is true. I am thankful for context and endorsements, since they support the reader more firmly, as you will shortly see. Our understanding of quality continues to evolve. It matures with the Internet. Perhaps in another 2 years, new ideas on internet quality will emerge. Quality is a fluid concept. I certainly expect the field will continue to develop. For the second trap, I ask you to confront how the notion of good and bad quality distorts more than it reveals. To suggest the word quality is singular is just grossly simplifying a complex situation. When we label information quality as good or bad, we make a value judgment based on who wrote it, when, and why. We also base this on the reputation of the publisher, the credentials of the author, on what others say of the information, on supporting evidence and presentation and style, and so much more. We cobble all this together into a summary, good or bad information. Too simple. Firstly, we really want specifics. We want to get intimate with information. Like a series of stepping stones, quality assessment often takes us to the next task, that of synthesizing a conclusion from several pieces of information. Creative synthesis requires diversity, agreement, and transparency. We will address this shortly, but transparency is the big one. Think about what we do with information. We want to appreciate the many strengths and weaknesses of information, not just apply a label. Secondly, information value depends on our question. Old information may be ideal for identifying the history of a person, but would be useless in locating their current whereabouts. Change our question, and what we value changes too. If we do label information as good or bad, we must relabel with each new question. The label good or bad tells us very little. Good information could be old or new, come from a respected publisher or an anonymous one. It could be from an experienced scientist, a journalist, or a psychotic bystander. Saying good information tells us only that we trust it in isolation. We strip strengths and weaknesses. We reduce bias to a linear measure, to acceptable or not. The good quality label also hints at a mistake in mathematics of quality. Do 2 good quality items add to a great conclusion, just as 2 bad items equal 1 good one? This simply is not so. 2 articles from the same old newspaper speak no stronger than 1. 2 fine articles may reflect the same perspective and refer obliquely to the same supporting evidence. Again, they speak no stronger than 1. Yet wildly dissimilar information, when combined, can be much stronger. Suddenly 1 plus 1 equals 3. We will not notice this if we strip information of its specific strengths and weaknesses. Time magazine occasionally delivers information in this way. 2 articles by different writers describe some newsworthy event from different perspectives. These 2 apparently separate articles happen to appear in the same magazine edition, side by side. Do these 2 articles assist us to gather a complete picture? It depends. In a sense, we're discussing just one article artificially split in 2 for stylistic reasons. Both parts of this split article reflect the publisher's bias. As we read and determine one argument is more persuasive, we cannot interpret this as strongly as we would were the articles truly separate and published in unrelated publications. These 2 articles share a clear bias. Here is how quality addition really works. Dixie the call girl reports a murder. Says Bruno the Cleaver did it, but Dixie is not a reliable quality witness. She could be lying for many reasons. Frankly, a call girl has little credibility in our society. As gumshoe detectives, we hit the road and find a 12-year-old boy who accurately describes the face of the killer. Golly, it sure looks like Bruno the Cleaver. Yet young boys also lack credibility. We consider children far too uncertain to tell the truth. Taken together, Dixie and the young boy's statement offers a strong case for a search warrant. Yet if the young boy were Dixie's son, this is not nearly strong enough. Clearly, details are important. To label both sources as poor quality simply loses the plot. We need details. We need to know who wrote what, not just the name, but credentials, depth of knowledge, and other articles they have prepared, and an indication of their professionalism. We need to know the publisher, their reputation, and other publications they have overseen. What do others say? We need to know this and many other aspects to the information. We need to know the many qualities of information. Remember the old detective shows on TV? The extremely British Inspector Morse listens to classical opera for hours as he ponders the subtle nuances of the information he collects. Inspector Morse does not tally with a scorecard. However, working with the many qualities of information need not be laborious and usually does not require opera music. As we will see with context, many clues positively leap at us in haste. Many clues to quality already flash before our eyes, needing only our recognition to be meaningful. Besides, much of the time we only investigate when quality seems doubtful or suspicious. Let us simply see many qualities to information and strive to keep these many qualities distinct in our mind, not lump them together to a simple statement, good or bad. Now for the third trap involving this topic of quality, notions of objective truth may encumber our quest for a meaningful conclusion. Is there truth? Yes and no. To simple questions, there are absolutes. We have John's telephone number, it works, fact. With complex questions, we are often better served avoiding the term fact and truth. Presume ever-present bias instead. Presume facts are unavailable. In a very postmodern perspective, perhaps there are alternative truths. Perhaps truth is simply not a practical possibility. Set aside our search for the most perfect information or pristinely honest information. Instead, let us synthesize something far more valuable from pieces of flawed information. This may seem strange, so let me marshal my argument carefully. Hammurabi, the ancient king of Mesopotamia, lived and ruled in the very early days of civilization in what is modern-day Iraq. Hammurabi was responsible for the very first legal code, including such timeless classics as an eye for an eye. Our question is this: when did Hammurabi live and rule? I reach for the internet and quickly find two conflicting dates. Surely he lived just once. We have made our mistake. The best answer may be a rough date of 1800 BC, give or take 200 years. This conclusion may not suit us. Perhaps we will look closely at the two dates, learn that one comes from a U.S. university professor discussing legal texts, the second comes from the staff of the Louvre Museum in Paris. The Louvre displays Hammurabi's famous stone tablet. The Louvre is reputable. I'm fine with accepting institutional reputation over the date suggested by a lesser-known university scholar. Was my choice driven by a conviction that I had to present just one date for consideration? If we are not careful, our convictions in truth and reality can restrict solutions to our detriment. Hammurabi's life is incompletely known. We already have two dates. Continued searching may lead us to conclude the date of Hammurabi's rule can only be guessed. Truth, however enviable a destination, may well elude us. Another example. Doctors struggle to save a young lady's life. She has cancer, so we hospitalize her. We pump her with chemotherapy. We strive to banish the evils of cancer. Oops, we forgot to ask the young lady if she agrees. We forgot to ask if she wants to spend perhaps her last remaining days of life vomiting into a hospital toilet. Perhaps she feels there is something more important she should be doing. Perhaps her culture, religion, or personal philosophy does not subscribe to our conviction that cancer is evil. Most likely, our patient wants to live and willingly undergoes any treatment for the slightest chance. However, by assuming this, we restrict our conclusions. We close down our options once we stand by certain facts. We distance ourselves from understanding alternative perspectives. Once we label a position as truth, we cannot so easily doubt it. Truth tends to be unquestionable and undeniable in this way. In society, we use various proxies for truth. We refer to expert credentials or institutional reputation. The legal profession seeks not truth, but sufficient proof to convince a jury of our peers, or an educated judge in countries that do not use the jury system. Politicians decide a course of action not based on truth, but on best advice and experience at hand. More cynically, perhaps politicians decide based on what is doable rather than right. Oh, we need our avatars. Let truth inspire us. But truth is often simply not part of our reality. As with our earlier discussion of good and bad information, truth is too simple a concept. Let us revisit fundamentalism for a moment and question whether the truths of a Bible-touting Christian missionary might not restrict their ability to understand a situation with alternative truth. Convinced of the need to protect souls, our young knight Albert will shortly bear witness to a crusade against the Cathars. History will treat the crusade as genocide. If truth has limitations, so does disbelief. We can mistakenly enshrine disbelief. We can move beyond a reluctance to believe in certainty to where we hold all events as always uncertain, always indecisive, no matter how clear the evidence. This, too, is not helpful. Consider the sociology of Holocaust denial. There was a Holocaust, the death of a great many Jewish and other minorities in World War II. Let us not discuss whether it occurred. The evidence is supremely strong. The counter-evidence offered by Holocaust deniers is frankly pathetic in comparison. Yes, history is constantly rewritten and reinterpreted based on a sound argument and evidence. However, we do not rewrite history without evidence. At some point we draw a line and say we believe this, until strong evidence emerges to suggest otherwise. This is the trap. Start by saying truth is relative. Let's talk about it. Now use this principle to attack any inconvenient but soundly proven argument. Preach, let us discuss whether the Holocaust occurred, but do not then engage in a discussion. Draw strength and awareness from let us discuss, but not from any persuasive argument that should follow. Empowered in this way, Holocaust denial has driven an unargued flight of fancy into the public arena with wide public awareness and wide economic disgust. A most amazing achievement. We get another taste of this effect in a recent U.S. federal court's decision to chastise a Pennsylvania school board for making a curriculum change. This change referred to intelligent design, ID, as an alternative to Darwin's theory of evolution. Judge Jones declared, quote, "To be sure, Darwin's theory of evolution is imperfect. However, the fact that a scientific theory cannot yet render an explanation on every point should not be used as a pretext to thrust an untested alternative hypothesis grounded in religion into the science classroom, or to misrepresent well-established science propositions." Close quote. In comment on this event, Eugenie Scott, Executive Director of the U.S. National Center for Science Education, states, quote, "It is already clear that the new slogan for the ID movement is going to be Teach the Controversy, even though there is no scientific controversy over the validity of evolution in biology." Close quote. ID has merit as a religious belief, and we judge religious beliefs by very different criteria. However, ID claims to be science, a science belonging in a classroom where religion is not invited. This is just wrong. Unargued and untestable, ID is not science. Arguing Darwinism is incomplete does not make it science. It resembles Holocaust denial in how both are unargued and unsupported claims standing against well-supported, soundly proven positions. Let's talk about it is used to lift both claims well beyond where they belong. It is not that Darwinism is pure truth, nor that the Holocaust may not one day be reinterpreted in light of new evidence. It is only that you and I should never have heard of Holocaust denial or the science of intelligence design. Why are we entertaining an unargued perspective? When do we discard unargued perspectives? We will not see an end soon to this style of intellectual sleight of hand. Truth and disbelief have their limitations. Sometimes no truth or reputable information can be found. Pretending truth exists in such an ill-informed environment just confuses the situation. Consider popular politics, where we often see only strongly biased information. All is spin. Reality is very confusing half a world away as I watch staged events orchestrated by political action groups reported through the filters of biased news organizations. Whether we're discussing the politics of Chinese-Taiwanese relations or Iraqi redevelopment, we have little more than rumor and spin to work with. Draw conclusions if you will, but do not trust them. Best admit we do not know and work from there. We should have opinions, but recognize when we are poorly informed. I simply cannot know with certainty if Iraq is improving as I write this line in early 2006. Perhaps I should wait a few years for the release of a documentary film, since we all know documentaries never display bias. As you can see, quality is a messy issue. In response, many professional researchers become slightly cynical. We look, decide, but sustain a partial disbelief in everything. We recognize how limited our access may be to the truth, and we know just how easily a reasonable argument can be neither reasonable nor truthful. Now is a good time to return to the tenets of Q4 quality assessment. Information quality emerges from internal clues, source, context, and endorsements. By looking at internal clues, we hope to judge information as sane and professional. Yes, we want information that shouts sanity and professionalism, largely because information with these qualities tends to be, usually, by and by, on most occasions, more valuable. Information that appears sane and professional may not actually be sane or professional, but most often is. Better information also tends to emerge from credible authors and exacting publishers. So now let us turn our attention to the degree of trust we bestow on the author and publisher. Q2, Author-Publisher Identity. An author and publisher with relevant experience reassures us. As our second task, Q2, we look at the identity of the author and publisher. We ask, does this author-publisher combination have the experience to present this kind of information, and if so, with what bias? The Internet is a splendid tool to investigate authors and publishers simply because so very much information gets published about authors and publishers. Anyone who creates a single Internet document tends to make 3 or 4. Anyone who writes 3 or 4 tends to include a short biography. We may seek information on obscure topics by reclusive writers, but usually we just seek information. Since prolific authors say more, and have more experience saying it, we usually encounter the prolific authors with biographies. Our first task is simple. Find this biography. Q2 overlaps partly with Q3, context, since one of the most useful ways to understand experience and bias is to read additional works by the same author and publisher. Additional publications